Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Everyone, please rise for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Julie, would you take roll call, please?
Yes. Steve Eisenbarth.
Present.
Robert Pope.
Present.
Aaron Tibabaugh. Don Loudon.
Present.
Greg Zuzan.
Present.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is consent agenda, check register 716, and Parks at Wind Farm, Section 2 bond release. Any questions or discussion?
Nope. I'll make a motion that we accept it as presented.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Great. Julie, roll call.
Don Loudon.
4.
Greg Zuzan.
4.
Robert Pope.
4.
Steve Eisenbarth.
4.
Okay, we'll go ahead and open up our first section of public comment if there's anyone that would like to come forward. No one coming forward, go ahead and close public comment and move on to council liaison reports. Robert?
Aaron's not here. I'm going to cover down his Avon PD highlights. The police department has started another hiring process, and online applications are open. You can visit our website to find out more information. The process will be open through the first part of September. Testing will begin on September 18th at ILEA. National Night Out Against Crime is just around the corner. It'll be held at the Avon Lowe's at Dan Jones, Rockville Road. It's August 3rd from 4 to 8 p.m. Hope everyone will come out and join us. Avon PD will be officially launching the Relay app. That's great. In our community very soon. The Relay app allows anyone in our community to easily report non-emergency concerns to the police department. App Store to download the app. Officer Tajay High began his assignment this week with the Regional Crime Gun Intelligence Task Force, that new task force that was created for Central Indiana. Task force focused on the prevention, investigation, and prosecution of violent gun crime offenders in the Indianapolis metropolitan area. Some township highlights. Township board met last week. Congrats on the Avon Junior Fire and Police Academy that graduated earlier this month. The township board created and assigned liaison positions to the other taxing entities, similar to what we did. Amanda to the school board, Shane to the library board, and Steve and Don to the town council. Welcome, Steve. Thanks for joining us. And they did. They're still on schedule, so there's the positive and highlight. But they're having just the same problems with us as Winter South, logistics, supply problems. But looks like they'll be back on track just fine for May 2022 for the Murphy Aquatic Park. That's it.
Great.
The only thing we had was a redevelopment meeting on Monday.
Stormwater did not have a meeting, and solid waste, we have one on Tuesday. I'll attend that. We had a great Talks Away Day at Hickory School, and we're going to get the numbers from that on Tuesday. Met with one of the county council members here this past week, and we talked about some neat things. It's fun to hear about what they like, and I assume it's probably the same as with the township, is we want to look for ways where we're similar, and we have. And we spent a lot of time talking about parks. About all the outreach and the beautiful things happening in the park. So going forward, I'm sure we're going to see both the county and the township and the town wanting to have some sort of maybe a combined event, or just have some interaction between our parks. So a very positive meeting. It was fun, and I look forward to other meetings. That's all I have.
Since our last meeting, I attended the Citizens Academy for Avon Police Department. That was fun. Got to watch the video of all of the attendees. And I think it was a nice meeting and a nice event. Robert and I attended, along with Julie and Sean, the Leadership Hendricks County Golf Outing at Deer Creek. That was fun. We did not win.
Did you get wet?
We did not win. We didn't cheat. We didn't cheat. That was the thing. Yeah. And then also attended the Washington Township Board meeting. And we're glad to have you as part of our team. Thank you. All right. There is no old business. We'll move on to new business. The first of which is the snow removal contract renewal. Ryan?
Yes, thank you. the town has had a longstanding relationship with Fox Contracting to do our snow removal. It's been about 18 years. And as we've grown as a town, they have grown with us as well. They've contributed to provide additional equipment, and certainly they've done a fantastic job. One of the things we pride ourselves on is the quality of our snow removal, and Fox deserves a lot of credit for that. They've had drivers who've been here for, like I said, 15 to 18 years who have a lot of ownership in Avon and the snow removal. So we did our long-term contract we had with them expired April 1st. And so in conversations with Fox, they have agreed to basically continue along the same agreement we had before, which is they basically have an hourly rate for all of their equipment that they provide us. But then each year they have basically a cost or an inflation escalator of 3%, which quite frankly, with the environment we're in right now, we're seeing a lot more than 3%. So 3% is a pretty reasonable rate increase. And that is for their labor and for their equipment as well. So there are some provisions in the contract about how they provide services and everything. That's basically what's been in place for quite a while, and that relationship's been working well. So it is a professional service, so that's why we're just proposing Fox. It's not quotes. We did, prior to the last long-term contract, we did shop this, and Fox actually came back with the lowest rate. Most other companies, they can provide the pickups, which is what we use to plow neighborhoods, but they don't have the single axle dump trucks that are capable of maintaining like the main roads, which is how we basically salt all of our main roads. So we would like to continue that relationship with Fox. And so what's on your agenda is their contract renewal, and it's 5 years, but then it has an allowance to go for 3 more years if both Fox and the town agree to continue. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
I've got one, but
Go for
Robert.
it.
Okay.
Go for it, Steve.
I'm just wondering in Article 1I, where it says yearly performance standards, the metrics on that, the 81.50, how'd that number come about?
It was basically, it's based on kind of the score sheet that we use. And it's above average. But I know I was asked that question, and in the 18 years they've done it, I think there's been only one time that they were actually below 81.5. Typically they're in the 96 to 100 range in terms of their evaluations. So like I said, that number was kind of midway between what would be unacceptable and what would be perfect. That's basically how we got to 81.5.
Okay. It just kind of it looked like a pretty precise number. So I was wondering if it was calculated based on an average or what it was, but okay.
Yep.
That was actually my question, and you already hit up the follow-up was what's the history on that? We've had a long-standing relationship with them. Just wanted to find out how often they've been above or below, and it sounds like 1% of the time they've been below. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, probably even less than 1%. Yeah.
Is this contract similar to prior contracts?
Yeah, actually, it's the same exact contract. It's a slight increase in the amount of equipment. So as we grow all the time, so if you notice in there, it says they'll dedicate 6 trucks. The previous contract said they dedicate 5 trucks with a 6th available. So this one says they'll dedicate 6 trucks with the 7th available. So as we keep growing and we get more main roads, and even like as we widen roads to 4 lanes, that requires more trucks. And so that's, I think, the only change in there, Greg. Otherwise, all the language is exactly the same.
I saw that too, so that's good. And then on the liquidated damages to the town for, I'll say, lack of performance, how do we know that they can provide that? Do they have a bond, letter of credit, or, I mean, if they're not performing and we're going to say, hey, you owe us a $75,000 liquidated damage, what's the odds of us collecting it if they're not performing?
Well, that doesn't it say they only have to perform 30%? 30% of the snow removal evaluations of that season.
Well, the
Be
liquidated,
below 8150, so it's only,
yeah, those liquidated damages are if they want out of the contract. And so those liquidated damages are, we're not going to provide you snow removal. And that's why the months are in there. So if in the summer they tell us, that gives us time to plan, which is why the amount of that is less. But if they tell us, if they come to us in November and say, we're not going to provide snow removal, that puts the town in a bad situation. Now we're going to end up to go find somebody else who's going to cost us a lot more money. So that was the intent of the liquidated damages. The other part of your question is probably a legal question, and I'd probably defer that to Dan.
Yeah, I've not seen a contract that has some sort of backup for that amount of money. And I've seen some financial disclosures required, but generally I would say if you don't think that they could come up with that, then probably should be doing business with them because the amount of capital that they commit to us is pretty big.
They've done a great job, so I make a motion that we approve the Town of Avon snow and ice removal services agreement as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. I just have one more question. We mow at 3 inches now, right? Is that, I mean, not
Plow?
mow, but we plow at 3 inches?
No, we actually still plow at 2 inches.
At 2?
Yeah, now that may be a discussion. So that's a snow removal policy discussion. But that's what the current policy says. If we get 2 or more inches of snow, that we'll plow all the streets in the neighborhoods will plow. We'll always plow in the main roads if it's snowing.
Okay.
One last question, and I'm for this, but I just want to check. Standby time on the rate sheet when they talk about, those high rates, when does that kick in? Do you know when that does?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's actually to our benefit. So there are occasions where we don't necessarily know when it's going to snow.
Mhm.
And so sometimes we call them out. So we say, hey, it may snow at 10 o'clock. So we say, we want you here by 9, ready to go. Well, if we look at the radar and it's not going to start snowing till 11, we put them on standby. But they're actually charging a lower rate then. We're just paying the personnel to be there. The way it used to be before we had that, we paid the full rate for the truck and the person. So that was actually something we negotiated with them to say, we don't want to have to pay for the vehicle when they're just sitting in it waiting for us to tell them to go. So that's really to our benefit for them to be out here on standby, ready to go.
Yeah, it's nice to have a chart that we could see exactly where it is and for each equipment too. So
Yep.
That's all I had.
Okay, so we do have a first and a second. So Julie, you want to take roll call?
Steve Eisenbarth,
4.
Don Loudon,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Robert Pope.
4.
Okay, next is traffic calming policy. Steve?
There we go. Steve Moore, Public Works Director. Before you have the traffic calming policy that we revised. There's only going to be one change in there, Robert, that you came up with, I believe. You identified that I had put in there in 2 different places, 75%. In one place, I put in a majority of the residents. And so that's what we had originally, was just the majority, but thought we needed to have more buy-in. So we moved it to 75%. So that one I missed, I need to update that. But are there any questions regarding any of the revisions or what's the intent is?
So that's on step 1 is that 75% we're
No,
talking.
this is actually almost the last step. This is the buy-in, the solution provided. The residents petitioned, the neighborhood requesting it. They need to have 75% agree on the provided solution. Before it was just worded as a majority. So we had a difference between supermajority and a simple majority.
Yeah, that's good.
Now it's-
Good metrics. Yep.
Now it's across the board, supermajority.
Yeah, I agree. I'm all for it. We need it. I know it's a tough one though. I don't know if we want to have a discussion, but it's just, it's a tough position when the neighborhoods want to have it, but we have to be very consistent. And I think this puts out the policy and it says it the way it could be.
Yeah, implementation is going to be important. Having the tools in the toolbox is always good, but implementation, how we go about it, is important. And so this process makes it pretty clear, and I think it'll help us out.
I think the key takeaway that I took away from it was the buy-in from those neighborhoods. They're going to have some skin in the game. I know that sounds silly when they're the ones living there, that they'll have to put forth some effort to make sure they can. We have a problem. Can you fix it? Hey, we've identified it. We've gathered data. And again, they put some skin in this game.
And the reason that's so important, just so that you don't have a neighborhood or someone putting out a statement saying, well, I need to have this. I know are speeding through here. And yes, that could be the case, but we want to know that they participate and they're not relying on the town as the first course of action. They look on their local HOA as a first course. Keep it on a local level.
One of the things I really like about this policy is that it's only, the only people that have a voting right on it is people directly infected. So you don't have people on the other end of the neighborhood that go in and out off of the main entrance voting for something that's in the back of the neighborhood. Because they can say, well, it doesn't affect me and I'm going to vote against it. So, it makes it more applicable to the people that are actually affected.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I really like that I wanted to highlight was it's not just you got a bad person in every neighborhood that's going to speed.
No.
This isn't going to address that one person. It highlights the 85th percentile, make sure that 85+% are speeding 10 miles and over. Now we actually have a problem. Not just, I saw that crazy neighbor every day. We can't address that one. We can address the road. So that's it. I'm in favor of this.
Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion. Yes, that we accept it as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Julie?
Greg Zuzen,
For.
Robert Pope,
4.
Don Loudon,
4.
Steve Eisenbarth.
4.
Next is Resolution 2021-16, approving interlocal agreement between Town of Avon and Town of Plainfield to provide sanitary sewer.
Yes, so I think the council is aware of this issue. We have a new development in Avon called Reagan Logistics, and it's on Ronald Reagan Parkway between 100 South and 200 South. It was actually in a gray area for who would service that area. The developer has worked with the town of Plainfield, and Plainfield has agreed to provide those sewers. However, in order for Plainfield to be able to provide sewers in the town of Avon corporate limits, we actually have to execute an interlocal agreement giving them permission to do so. So this agreement is that exact agreement, basically allowing Plainfield to service that area. This was actually drafted by Dan and then was shared with Plainfield. So I think we feel pretty good about it, but we're happy to answer any questions if you guys have any.
The Plainfield Town Council has already approved this.
The Plainfield Town Council has already approved it. That's correct.
My only question is, we reference Exhibit A. Is Exhibit A the intergovernmental cooperation agreement concerning sanitary? So do we need to mark it as Exhibit A or not?
We'll insert a cover page.
Anyone else? Either to the point of asking for this. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to approve Resolution 2021-16, a resolution approving interlocal agreement between the town of Avon, Indiana and the town of Plainfield, Indiana to provide sanitary sewer services as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Julie?
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Steve Eisenbarth,
4.
Robert Pope,
4.
Don Loudon.
4. Next is ordinance 2021-13, just a technical correction to the town code. Dan?
Yes, this ordinance, as I explained last time, just makes small and technical corrections to errors in your town code. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
It's great reading. No questions.
No questions? Do we have, that is our final reading, so we do have.
I'll make a motion. We adopt ordinance 2021-13 technical corrections to town code as written.
I will second that.
Okay, we have first and second. Julie?
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Don Loudon,
4.
Robert Pope,
4.
Steve Eisenbarth.
4.
Next is a final reading on ordinance 2021-14, amendment to provisions regarding regulation of canvassers. Mr. Taylor?
This ordinance makes one change to your regulation of canvassers. It would change the time period from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and instead make it 9 a.m. to sunset, which most of the time would be a little sooner in the year. But there have been some cases that have found that if your regulation of the time has to do with fighting crime and preventing people from coming to your house after dark, that you should just say after dark and not pick some arbitrary time. So The Seventh Circuit has ruled this way in a couple cases, so we're just trying to bring your regulation into a compliant standing. And this is second reading also.
Thank you. Any discussion?
My only comment here is you'll see a lot out there where some neighborhoods have issues with solicitors for one. And I think the big misnomer is if the homeowners association says no soliciting, or the subdivision has a sign out front that says no soliciting, that doesn't matter. That if you don't want somebody to solicit or knock on your door, you need to put it on your property. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. Both canvassing, which is the highest form of First Amendment speech, it's political speech, passing out of pamphlets by political candidates or political organizations, and then solicitation, selling something. They're both protected under the First Amendment, so they have, significant protection. And so what the courts have allowed and what your policy says is that if a person wants to prevent that, then it has to be on their property, and then it is not allowed. The blanket reproach at the front of a HOA or front of a subdivision doesn't count. In the same manner, the town can't prevent it. And I think there's you may get calls about that. Why don't you prevent this? And the cases are very clear that you cannot. So we're doing all we can do. Absolutely. We're pushing right up to everything we can do and keeping it that way.
Thank you.
Correct process. If there is a resident who has a problem, a solicitor doesn't have a permit with the town, et cetera, they contact the clerk treasurer's office.
For solicitors, canvassers, we cannot require them to register or get a permit. And so there are two different ordinances. You have one for solicitors, they're selling something, one for canvassers. And the First Amendment even recognizes the right of people to pass out political information anonymously. And so if someone has trouble with someone knocking on their door about this, or being there too late, they should call the police, because that's how that would not be Julie's problem.
I'm muddying the waters there. Thanks, Dan. Fair enough.
But
Yeah.
that's an important distinction. I think it's been a long time ago, but in 2005 or 6, we had this issue come up because we had a very aggressive political canvassing for a cause, not a candidate, just a cause. And they were all over, and it really got people riled up. And we reacted to that by changing this ordinance to tighten it up as much as we could. But the Supreme Court has said that the right to distribute political information is one of the oldest rights we have in this country, that goes back to the colonial days, even before the Constitution was written. So it is. And so the only interest that the town government has to counteract that is crime fighting. And the courts recognize that as a very important right. And so that's why they allow us to do what they do. But they will not allow, it used to be that we required canvassers to register with the clerk treasurer as well as solicitors. And then we had a letter from the ACLU that prompted us to examine that, and we changed it.
It's a good reminder to have sign on your door if you really have a strong opinion about it.
And I think to bring it up,
We have the,
if you are a company, not a political canvasser, if you are a company, you can find an application to solicit within the town of Avon at avongov.org. You can find the application. You do submit that as a company to the clerk treasurer's office per solicitor. And then I turn them over to the police department for background checks. We currently do have one company under review at the police department, and they may be coming to a door near you soon.
I think the highlight, if you don't want that, no soliciting on your property, not the neighborhood.
Do we have little stickers that we can give to our residents if they ask for those, to say, we don't want somebody to be knocking on our door?
There's political candidates in the past that have done that.
Right.
Yeah.
The town council did that once. When this first arose, the town printed them and made them available in, like I said, 2005 or 6.
We don't need to put the name of the persons on the council. We can just put no soliciting.
You're saying cut his name out? Is that what you're saying?
Okay, any more discussion, or can we get an?
I'll make a motion that we accept ordinance 2021-14, amendments to provisions regarding regulation of canvassers.
A second.
Right, Julie?
Robert Pope,
4.
Steve Eisenbarth,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Don Loudon.
Four. Next is a final reading on ordinance 2021-15, amendments to provisions regarding clerk treasurer and town manager.
Yes, and we looked at your town code for corrections. We found that your provisions regarding the clerk treasurer and town manager were woefully outdated. And that the statute had changed, and certainly in both areas, the statutory duties of both positions had expanded. The clerk treasurer has expanded quite a bit, a lot bigger job than it used to be, and the town manager. So we thought it would be well to correct those. It really serves as a point, really an educational point for the public and for you and for the persons holding these positions about what their duties actually are. So these changes are exactly what the statute says. There's no sort of license we've taken here. These are just trying to line these up with the statute. This is also second reading, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So we still get Julie's wonderful reports, right? Because I look at item 3 here, and I'm just making sure we are going to get our reports. Is that correct?
Every month.
I just treasure those things, so, all right.
Yes, it's fantastic reading.
That's the only thing I wanted to say.
I make a motion, we approve ordinance 2021-15, amendments to provisions regarding clerk treasurer and town manager as presented.
I'll second.
Great, thank you, Julie. Next one, please.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Robert Pope,
4.
Don Loudon,
Four.
Steve Eisenbarth.
4.
All right. Next is final reading on ordinance 2021-16, amendment to provisions regarding regulations of parking and spaces designated for people with physical disabilities. Dan?
Yes, the state legislature has expanded a little bit the type of vehicles and drivers who qualify for parking in an ADA parking spot. As you know, those are reserved for persons traditionally with disabilities or disabled Hoosier veterans. So some of these are just language changes, but also the law now has been changed to make clear that if you are providing transportation for one of those sets of people, that you are also allowed to park there, whether you have a placard or not. And that's a good change as well, because that's done more and more, whether it be through a formal VFW van or just someone providing that service to a neighbor. There was some confusion about that. So from time to time, the legislature makes these revisions. We want to make sure that we know what we're enforcing. So this brings you up to compliance. This is also second reading.
Any discussion?
I'll make a motion, we adopt ordinance 2021-16, amendment to provisions regarding regulations of parking and spaces designated for persons with a physical disability or disabled veterans.
Second.
We have a first and a second, Julie.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Robert Pope,
4.
Don Loudon,
Four.
Steve Eisenbarth.
4.
Okay, next is final reading on ordinance 2021-17, amendments to provisions of police department regarding school resource officers and take-home cars.
Yes, this makes 2 changes. First, there was a section in your police ordinance, we call it 2-50 in succession, that talked about school resource officers. So with the formation of the school's own police department, we have deleted that. And then, believe it or not, the town council used to apparently had for a long time and may not have known, but there was in the town code a rule about take-home cars, and so last year there was a case, Indiana Supreme Court case that talked about this issue, and I worked with the chief, and in that case, which involved Indiana State Police cars, said that if the department has a written policy that requires certain things, then the municipality can be immune from liability for off-duty police officers who are in their cars. And that was a big issue. We wanted to make sure we fell within that safe harbor. So Chief Stoops drafted, and I helped him work on a general order, which is something the chief can issue. And we took care of that issue through a general order. And so what this change says is, rather than you all controlling that, is consistent with that case, we want the police chief issuing that general order, establishing very specific rules officers must follow if they're using a car in an off-duty way, and a take-home car while they're off duty. And so since the chief has done so, and appreciate that, chief, then this rule just said the chief of police will take care of this issue and make rules. And we want to do that. It gives us flexibility to react more quickly than amending the code all the time.
Thank you. Discussion?
Nope.
Motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept ordinance 2021-17, the amendments to provision of police department regarding school resource officers and take-home cars.
I'll second.
Thank you. Julie?
Don Loudon,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Steve Eisenbarth,
4.
Robert Pope.
4.
Next is an introduction of ordinance 2021-18, amending the employee.
Yes, this ordinance is again one of the results of new legislation. So this ordinance does really three things. First, both Congress and our state legislature passed Pregnancy Rights Acts this past session. And those rights were designed to formalize what I think we were already doing under our Americans with Disability Act in terms of providing reasonable accommodations to employees who were pregnant or had medical issues related to childbirth. With these new laws, we now want to separate that and make that a policy of the town, and also put it in our employee handbook so our employees know their rights and our department heads know how to administer it. And so under this policy, both the policy, which would be in new section 257, and also in the employee handbook in 3.22, it essentially says that a person who believes they need a reasonable accommodation while pregnant or having medical complications or concerns regarding childbirth may request a reasonable accommodation, and the law now imposes the obligation on the employer to respond within a reasonable time and to work with the employee to find something. In this particular area, and again, I think you guys are way ahead of this, but now what's contemplated is, that accommodation may just be shorter work days. It may not be a serious thing. It may be shorter work days. It may be fewer days a week. It may need flexible leave to attend medical appointments. It could be something more serious if there are complications. But this really takes pregnancy rights and puts it in its own place under a federal and state law. And so this policy says that we'll do those things, and we will not discriminate against people who ask for such accommodation. We will not retaliate against them. We won't retaliate or discriminate against persons who maybe advocate for that for other employees. And so this policy just simply restates what the federal and state law are, but will give it its own place, easy to see, easy to administer. And those are the first two sections, which are under really what I call the Pregnancy Rights Acts, both federal and state. The second section on the last page is what refers to concerted activities. And under the National Labor Relations Act, there is a right of all employees, whether they are union or not, to engage in concerted activities. And the best example of what is a concerted activity is two employees talking to each other about what they get paid. Now, you all do nothing that I'm aware of that would infringe upon any employee's concerted actions or activity. And it's not our intention at all. But what this section is designed to do is to say, we know there is this right. We don't want to infringe upon this. And we want to state in our handbook that nothing in our employee handbook should be read to infringe upon those rights. So this creates a safe harbor for us. And again, I've been here, 17 years. We've never had an issue with this, but there have been some cases coming out under what's called Section 7, where the courts are inquiring as to whether there are inconsistencies between Section 7 and these employee handbooks. So what we do, and we do this in a variety of employment rights area, we like to say we are trying to comply with that and don't read any of these words to be contrary to those rights. And so that's what this is.
Got a question, I think, for Ryan. We discussed this a little bit. Most everything, this is mainly under the pregnancy and childbirth accommodation policy. Most everything is more procedure-based, except paragraph D. The town will keep confidential files documenting accommodation requests and their dispositions that are separate from other personnel records. I do not believe we have that yet, and yet being the key word. We're working on that to make sure we comply with this completely.
We have that in place already.
We do? Okay, that's been changed then.
Julie and I
Great.
talked about
We had
it
this
today.
discussion, when I took office, we have our red folder, which is our confidential folder within the employee file. So that if someone were to want to see a file, they get this section, but not the red file.
Good deal.
So we do
Thank you.
comply.
That's good. Thank you.
I think your staff's doing a better job than ever on HIPAA and related privacy issues, and that's, we've had some discussions about it, but I think that they've really taken that seriously, and that's great.
I just was wondering, I know these are additions to the handbook. Are there adjustments to the handbook? Because some of these do any of them overlap a little bit and we need to, redline and get rid of some of those?
No, we do not. We looked at that, Steve. Under the ADA rights is where this would come in. We have lots of sections that talk about a reasonable accommodation for a disability. And we believe, and really have advised the town for many years, that pregnancy is a disability to the extent that it adversely affects all those activities of life, which are like 27 of them. And I don't know, I know it did for my wife, so I can't speak for everyone, but I know it did. And so we've always treated that as falling under the penumbra of disability in particular cases. What this does is it really removes any doubt about that. So for those employers who did not treat it that way, Congress has made a statement.
Mhm.
And the state legislature has made a statement that just to be clear, you guys have always been, I think, well ahead of the curve when it came to your employee policies. I think it was intentional, and you guys have always done a great job, always being way ahead. So we rarely find ourselves catching up. And so we're just going to mirror it, but we did not see any provision in the existing employee handbook or policies that overlapped, which is good. I'm glad we didn't have it wrong. But I really think that your department has already been doing this the right way for many, many years. Now the legislatures have finally caught up, and it was done this year as part of the, conversation about what the government can do to better protect workers and employees in the areas of sick leave and childcare in that. And so there were a lot of bills presented. This bill made it through both the Congress and the state legislature in fairly harmonious acts, which were easy to put together. So your policy represents, I took the two acts and put them together. And so really the federal act is an anti-discrimination law, and the state law is really a legal recognition of the right to request a reasonable accommodation if you fall into that, if you're pregnant or you have childbearing problems or issues. And so we married those two things together, and we really just want the employees to know the rights. We want department heads to be able to open the handbook up and the policy book up and see what they need to do as a department head. So we want it to be clear, but we did look at that. We don't think there's anything else you have to do.
No, it's great. Appreciate you unpacking it. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for keeping us ahead of it all, because you're the one that's guiding us in it, so we appreciate it. Any other discussion? It was an introduction.
Yeah.
We'll consider it introduced. Next to legal counsel reports.
I have nothing other than there'll be some more ordinances to stay abreast of these changes. You're through most of them. I think we might have one left, but we've really pushed these through pretty quickly, so you're in good shape.
It's good for you.
Thanks, Dan.
This will be our second public comment period. Is there anyone that would like to come forward that did not come forward during the first? Okay, with no one coming forward, we'll close the second public comment. On to council calendar. Ryan?
Just point out that we do have a work session on August 12th at 5:30, and then you have your regularly scheduled meeting on August 12th at 7 p.m.
Thank you. We're adjourned.